There we go. Hello everyone and welcome to Blue Tengu's live game development show where we show everything that goes into making a game from concept to completion. If you've ever wanted to make a game, we hope this will help lower the barrier to entry, maybe give you the nudge you needed to try it yourself. Even if you don't want to make a game, we hope you'll find some entertainment value in what we're doing here. All of the information about where you can find us is in the Twitch info down below or in the YouTube profile for those of you who are catching us later on YouTube. But just in case, we're at www.bluetengu.com, btengu on Twitter, facebook.com Blue Tengu Studio for those of you on Facebook, youtube.com Blue Tengu Studio for those of you who are watching us now on Twitch, and Twitch TV Blue Tengu for those of you who are catching us later on YouTube. We do this show every Saturday morning, so drop on by if you want to see it live. If you've missed any episodes, you can always catch them over at YouTube, but you shouldn't have any trouble following along even if you haven't caught any before. For those of you who haven't seen the show before on Twitch or YouTube, my name's Eric. I'm a game designer living in Japan who's trying to show you everything that goes into making a game for 2 hours a week, including all the ums and ahs and awkward debugging moments that pop up. The reason I'm showing it all as opposed to making the game first and scripting out a rehearse tutorial like most people is because I want to lower that barrier you feel about making a game. And I think the only way to do that is by showing that the work that goes into it, basically. And some of the mistakes that happen along the way, because if you see someone just do everything perfectly, it's kind of like trying to learn how to swim by watching, a gold medalist or something, and I'm definitely as far from that as you can get. And hopefully, when you see this, you can get inspired to go out and try it yourself. Thank you to everyone who dropped by last week, and to all those of you who watched the video on YouTube. For those of you who are with me live here on Twitch, feel free to drop suggestions or ask questions at any time. I may not be able to answer them right away because I am, in the middle of actually making the game, but I'll try to get to them. And if I can't, please send me a private message here or leave a comment on our site or YouTube video, and I'll do my best to address it at least next time. If any of you are out there making something and you don't mind showing it off, send me a link to your stuff. I'd love to see it. Anyway, at this time every week for 2 hours, I come onto Twitch TV to work on the game Project Spaghetti, a top-down 2D cowboy shooter where the bullets fired bounce around the screen with a pinball mechanic. Last week I added a couple of menus, mostly system stuff, so the game over menu, the options menu. The main reason I went into the options menu was because I wanted to get a handle on resolution changes and whether I'd actually need to create separate sets of sprites for the different aspect ratios, like 4:3, 16:9, 3:2 for iOS devices. Lucky for me, the game's retro style works pretty well stretched out, even just stretched out from 4:3 to 16:9, for example. So I should be able to get away with designing for one aspect ratio and stretching or shrinking, or even using some bordering to make up for the difference. One conclusion I did come to was it was probably a better idea to design for something in the middle, like the iOS 3:2 ratio, and then shrink it or stretch it. That way it's not as far apart. And after the show I used some overtime to add the pause screen version of the options menu because it's a little different from the one that's available from the title screen, as well as to double check the game over to title screen flow. It was working fine. I just wanted to make sure. Also added a feature to auto-detect the player's current display resolution and pick a default resolution to fit that style. And to top off the resolution system, I looked around to find the most common resolutions and made those the ones the player could choose from. To avoid having to redo that selection every time, I did add a quick save and load system, but I can show you that when I jump in the game. With all that system stuff out of the way, I can go back to focusing on gameplay. The first thing I wanted to add is something to show the player how many points they're getting when the bullets hit the enemy, because right now the only thing that happens is that the score in the upper right corner of the screen goes up, and that's not enough, because if I do my job right, I made a post about this on www.bluetengu.com, but the player will be too focused on the game, which is in the middle of the screen, to keep looking up at that score and see how it's been changing when they hit stuff. I want the enemies to leave behind a score, and I want to color code it to the bullet color to make it pretty clear what the point multiplier was. I probably will also just say 100 times 3 or something in the text as well. And once I get the scoring out of the way, I'll want to add some variety to the game by allowing those barrel obstacles that I've been having to be randomly placed at certain predefined locations, nodes. So let's jump over to my Trello.com task list here. Let me jump to the desktop there. Okay, right now, let me go through what I did in the overtime here. So the options menu, the pause screen version. I did QA the game over title screen flow, found it was working fine. Auto-detected ideal resolution, did a save load system, and one more thing that I added here as well is saving and loading to files is fine, but it's just text, so if I save a high score to the file, then the player can just say, alright, 1,000,000 points or something, and suddenly they have a high score of 1,000,000 points. Probably not a good idea, so did do some basic encryption on that save file, and I'll show you how I did that before jumping into other stuff. So the task right now is to have the enemies leave behind a score. And I do have HUD score multiplier text here, but I'm going to combine those two tasks by showing the multiplier in the score that the enemies leave behind. And then after that I can get to the random object nodes. So let me show you where I am right now in Project Spaghetti. By the way, my allergies are starting to kick up for the fall season of allergies, so if I sound a little nasal, more nasal than usual anyway, that's why. And if my voice cuts out, that's why. So I better keep on my water here. Okay. So here's the game. It's not filling up the screen with the default resolution because I've already changed the resolution once. I can go into options now and fiddle with this if I want to. Right now the 3 that I can pick from are these ones, but I'll go ahead and pick the big one. Why not? And I also have these other options ready to go hooked into going to implement those features as well. But let's start. So as you can see, like in the upper right corner, I do have a high score of like 2,300 from a previous game, so it is saving. And, you know, there's not too much new to the game. That guy just shot himself, which is not very smart of him. I am noticing one thing here. When I do change the resolution, the enemy dodge doesn't seem to be working as well. So I think that is something I will have to worry about, maybe. Yeah, the enemies seem to be shooting themselves and everything else, and I think I know why. But let's jump out of this and show you the options in the pause screen. So again, in here you can go back and forth and stuff like that. And you can go back to the title screen. And it saves everything when you jump to a new level, etc. So, before I forget, alright, the usual shockwave flash plugin error, which means my Twitch thing on my browser is going to crash on me. Let me just jump over and start that up again. Okay. So, let's see. I do need to add a debugging task for later. If I can spell. Coffee was a little weak this morning, so I'm a little slow on the draw here. So debug, how should I phrase this so I'll remember it like 2 months from now when I finally get to it, or if I get to it later this week and I'm just sleepy. Resolution change, effects, dodge, timing, bullet creation. And I don't think that'll take too long to fix, because it's just right now all that stuff is hard-coded and I need to adjust it based on the resolution. And I better move that up to something higher. Keep the priority up there. I've also been adding to this task list, and you can always go to Trello and see this board publicly. Unless you have the what is it called, Scrum for Trello plugin, you won't see like the numbers being counted up at the top or anything, but you'll still see like the numbers in parentheses and stuff, my estimates and all that. And the easiest way to search for this, I usually put the link up on YouTube, and it's down at the very bottom of the Twitch feed, but if you just search for Trello Project Spaghetti, it usually pops up first. Until someone else makes a Project Spaghetti Trello board, I guess. So, let's see, that's that. Alright, so I'm not going to worry about that for now. What I am going to do is probably switch the resolution back so that the gameplay works as expected. Okay. So, it should save that for me. Yep. And let me show you how that saving is working. Right now I have two scripts, one for save, one for load. When I call the save script, what it does, let me expand that out there. This is just a debug message for my information. It opens this global.ini file, and that is defined down here. So spaghetti.ini. With GameMaker, this always goes into like the project folder that the GameMaker game is playing in. And I've also got something called a hash file, which will come up, but just remember that. So all this does is it opens that text file and creates it if it doesn't exist. And then all it's doing, real simple, is uses this ini write real to write to a section called system, gives it a title called scale, and then it just writes that resolution scale for me. Same with X scale, Y scale. Also, because I can't write a boolean to the file, what I'm doing is just saying full screen is 1 if it's true, 0 if it's false. So that's why I have this if else in here. Volume, brightness, all that stuff is same thing, goes into system. And then the final thing here is game high score, because I want to remember the player's high score. And then all I do is close the file. If I stopped here, it would work. It'd still work. The only thing is, you could just open this spaghetti.ini file and change any of these, which is alright for system stuff, but for like high score, things like that, probably not a good idea. So there's one extra step in here. And what that is I create like a hash file. So what this is, it's probably going to be easier. Well, no, it makes sense here as well. So what I do is I open the spaghetti.hsh file. I write a string to it. And what this sha1 file function does is it takes this file, spaghetti.ini, takes all the information into it and creates a special code, using sha1, creates a special code for it and writes that to the file and then closes it. That's all it does in the save part. Now in the load part, it checks to make sure that file exists, opens it up, reads that special string, closes the file because I don't need it anymore because I have the string in memory. And what it does is it double checks to make sure that is the same thing as, try once again to, grab that file and encrypt it and makes sure those two like hash values are the same. If they're not the same, that means the file's been changed, right? There's probably ways to get around it, but it's enough to, at least throw off, people who are just playing the game for fun. Obviously, hackers can get around it, etc. I'm not going to worry about that too much, because if I had leaderboards and stuff like that, all of that tracking would probably be on a server somewhere anyway. This is just for local stuff. And once it verifies that, that's okay, opens the ini file, reads all the stuff in, and just to make sure that if the user does, fiddle with things, that I don't totally screw them over, I do leave, the volume and brightness and things that don't really matter to the game. I'll read that regardless of whether the hash file checks out. But for high score, I set it to 0 if the hash file's been tampered with. Kind of a punishment there. So that's that. So now let's get to this leaving behind a score thing. Because right now, I have a pretty good image of it on the blog if you want to go and see it. But like in the upper right corner there, you see I have score. And if I hit an enemy, the score goes up. And there it went up by 200. But unless you're constantly watching that score value and adding and subtracting in your head, you don't really know, how these bullets going faster or slower are affecting your score. You don't really know that the green enemies are worth more than the red enemies. It's kind of, there's not much to the strategy of like speeding bullets up and everything else if you don't know that they mean anything. So to show that they mean something, I want to leave something behind when I hit an enemy. So like there, before that bullet shows up, I do want to show, that was worth 200 points or something. To do that, let's see, how am I going to go about it? Let's see, I do have an enemy class, which is the parent for all of these other classes. One thing I do have to remember is that although this enemy has a create class, it's being overridden by these other create classes. So yeah, it's kind of unfortunate. At some point, I should probably split that out into functions. So let's make a task for me to do that as well. I won't get to it this episode, but let's put it down here. Trello's starting to get a little slow on me. Hopefully it holds up for the rest of the season. Let's see. It's not really a debug thing. It's more of a system thing. So what this is right now, I've got this enemy create that doesn't do anything because it's always overridden, but every enemy has to do most of this stuff. So what I want to do is, instead of doing all of this individually, if it's shared between all the enemies, then I should just have like a separate script somewhere. That way I only have to modify it once if I want to make a change, because this method that I'm using right now could introduce a lot of bugs. Because if I remember to change bad cowboy but I forget to change one of the other enemies, then I'm going to wonder why only this enemy is behaving weirdly, and if it's months later I'm not going to remember why. So I really only want to show the things that are different, like shoot frequency, for example, is different between bad cowboy and badder cowboy, so that should be here. But for most of this stuff, like setting dodge to 0, meaning they're not yet dodging, that should be shared. So that should go into like a script somewhere that's loaded. Unfortunately, I am going to have to add a new variable, I think, that keeps track of score, like how many points this thing is worth when it dies. So let's see. EM, I'll just call it score. And I think it's, what is it? EM base score? Now global dot. Where do I set that? This one, BC base score. All right. All right. Well, I do have BC base score, so let's just do that. Doesn't seem very important at the moment, but it will be important later. Why do I have two variables holding the same thing? If you're asking yourself that, there's a reason for it. Man, I cannot get used to the way GameMaker copy and pastes this GUI stuff. I can never add it to the end. I have to always like move stuff around. Okay, so now I have EM score, and all it is right now is it's just set to the base score. But when these guys die, regardless of what enemy type they are, I do want to say script in here. I want to leave behind some text that says how many points they were worth, which is that EM score thing. Let's see, is it draw text? And color, using the British spelling. I guess GameMaker must be made in the UK or something. X and Y is where the enemy object is. The string I want to show is that score value. These three colors. Actually, I don't want to use color, do I? I want to set color. So let's just leave it at that. And I did look it up a little bit here. These are things I'm going to want to use. I did define like the different Commodore 64 colors, like so far. In the past, I've always been using these colors to draw things, so I want to keep that consistent. So I defined all of the red, green, blue values as global variables so I could use them in the game. So that's what these are. And so this will center the text. This will draw with a certain color, which, let's see, what color do I want to use? I do want eventually to make the color dependent on the color of the bullet. So I'll make the default white and leave a note for myself to do that. Okay, well that should do the trick anyway. One problem I am going to have is that right now, when an enemy runs into a bullet, they die. More importantly, the object gets destroyed. So I'm going to need to delay this, which means I'm going to have to worry about an alarm. And I'm going to have to set visible to false. I'm not sure if the collision's going to stick around. I may have to turn collision off too, because otherwise bullets will magically disappear into this invisible object. That's what I suspect will happen anyway. But first things first, let's set the alarm. So make a new alarm. And all this is going to do, if I can remember where it is destroy the instance, destroy itself. So now, instead of just destroying the instance here, I want to call an alarm. And that was alarm number 4. And this will depend on how long I want to display the text. So I do want to create a global variable for that so I don't have to keep updating this by hand. I'll call it score time. And before I forget to add that, let's make it 1 second. 2 seconds. Number of seconds to display the score enemies leave behind. So I know what it is later. That should do that. Now, theoretically anyway, it shouldn't destroy the object until that happens. Unfortunately, I do have to turn visibility off, which I think is just visible false. And I do need to look up as well from script. Hopefully someone has an easy answer here. Yeah, that's for physics. That's a little different. That's for if you're actually making a game that uses gravity, etc. Since this is top-down, I don't actually have gravity. Game maker. It doesn't seem like anyone's doing this. Does that mean I don't really need to worry about it? Okay, well I guess hide. Oh, this is for rigid bodies though. Let me see something. Game maker, hide object. Instance deactivate. No, that's not quite what I want to do, because that would stop the logic of leaving behind like the score and everything else too. That's not quite what I want to do. Yeah, it doesn't seem like anyone's turning collision off, so maybe this will be enough. We'll find out. So, right now, That's that. And I probably also want to change EM score here to be equal to this value that it's going to display, which is BC base score times other, the bullet multiplier. And just to save myself a quick multiplication operation, I'll just make this here. Okay, so EM score is equal to BC base score times the bullet multiplier. Increment the score as it always has been. And I need to tell the system that the enemy is dead. So I need another thing I need to add to the create thing here. This will probably come in handy for the future too, because the enemies are eventually going to have like a dying animation. So let's say EM dead. And copy that over to Badger Cowboy. Let's try and put it in the middle there, see what happens. Rather than having to drag it down all the way from the top. Okay, so by default they're not dead. Good stuff. And if they run into a bullet, then they are dead, as happens. And let's see. Where did I put that script? I could swear I had a script open. Now I'm kind of worried. Where did I put this thing? Okay, that's really weird. I mean, you guys did see me write that script and put it somewhere, right? Where did it go? It's not in there. It's not in there. Wow, okay. Yeah, I'm totally confused. Where did I put that? Because I had... There was something that had a draw GUI in it, I think. So I made that mistake. No, it's not that. Wow, okay, well, this is scary. Let's see what happens. Let's see if a bug can find it for me. Nope. Wow, unfortunately it's not broken, so I'm not going to be able to find that. Well, guess I better hope I run across it at some point. Okay, well, I'll just type it out again. I'm sure I'll be just as interested in watching this like YouTube video as some of you guys. So I have to dig back through and figure out where I put that thing. Well, anyway, if EM dead is true, was it true? Got off on a tangent there. Yeah, EM dead 0. Let's say false. Let's change that to false. Just so I'm using booleans. emdead. If emdead is true, then do what I've gotten here. And what I've gotten here is what I've probably put somewhere else by mistake, which is draw text, x, y, and the string is emScore. And I need to bring back that color stuff. Let's grab that. And use the default white. Wow, this is really bugging me. Where did that script go? Because I even remember doing all these comments too. Center the text. It's like I've entered the Twilight Zone. Pick the color based on the bullet. Draw the score text. Find out what happens. And I wonder if there's a way to get rid of this score once it's displayed. I guess when the enemy gets destroyed, it's going to get destroyed with it. Let's find out what happens. Yeah, the collision is still there, I can tell. Because weird things are happening. And it's not displaying the score in the right place anyway. So much for that. If emdead is true, then draw text. Well, I see what's going on here. That's unfortunate. What's going on is one of the mistakes I made before is that when this visible check is off, and basically when I turn visible off, it's basically like unchecking this. It means it no longer comes into this draw function, which is no good. So I guess that means I have to create an object just to display points. Yeah, I think that's what I have to do, unfortunately. And to do that, I'm going to be needing to pass this thing information. Which is what I'm going to have to do through there. Okay. Well, can't get away with just turning visible off and leaving it at that, so I do have to create, unfortunately, an object to show the score. So let's do that. Let's call it enemy score. And it has to be visible because it's going to be displaying text. And all this is going to do is display text. And so that doesn't disappear on me. I'm just going to drop this in there. And whatever I had in enemy down here now has to go in there. Make sure I don't delete the wrong one here. When I create this thing, I'm going to need to have that variable. What should I call it? ES score, since it's enemy score score. And I'll set that to 0 by default because I should be overwriting it every time I use this thing. I'm still drawing where this object is, but now I'm drawing ES score. And now, when the enemy dies, when they run into a bullet, I don't want to set this to false anymore because its collision's still there. So let's not do that. What should I do? Well, let's just create the object first before I forget. So I want to create a new ES score, enemy score object. I want it to be exactly where the enemy was. Actually, I need to do this in script, unfortunately. GUI is not quite up to the task, because I need to label it. And I need to change that variable to be EM score. And that's all I have to do there. And I can get rid of that. I guess for now, until I start working with animation, I'm not going to worry about this alarm. So I'm going to delete this and delete this. So it's back to where it was before. As soon as you hit an enemy, it runs through all this and then it destroys the enemy. The only difference is now that it creates an enemy score object where the enemy died. And I still do need a timer here. That's going to say stick around for X number of seconds. So when it's created, I need to set that alarm. Room speed times global. What did I call it? Score display or something like that. Let me look it up here. Score time. Okay. So as soon as it's created, it starts this timer. When the timer hits, it'll destroy this object, and with it, the thing that's drawing the text. Hopefully, this is all I need. I don't think I left any junk behind. What's here? Path add, emdon, shoot frequency. Well, it's not using any of the stuff in create anyway. So that's all the stuff I added to enemy was in the bullet thing. Sets the dead to 1, that's fine, I'll be using that later anyway. Destroys the instance. Okay. Anything in here that I left behind? Yeah, EM score is still being set to that. Actually, there is one other thing I do need to do. When the enemy runs into bullet, right now I have this EM score being the total score. Now I don't know if I want to do that, actually. Let's make this a little more efficient because at some point I'm also going to want to display the fact that, you know, it's 2 times 200. And if I just pass the total score, which is 400, for example, then all that enemy score object's going to know to display is 400 when I want it to display 2 times 200. So I need to have both of those variables separate. So what I should do is create this object up here. And I don't need the extra E in enemy. He's not that bad. And I'll call it multiplier. And what I should have this be equal to is other BL score multiplier. And I guess I don't need an EM score variable anymore. So this will just be BC base score. And ES multiplier, I'll have to remember to add that. So let's put this back to where it was. And get rid of that. Okay, so ES multiplier. And before I forget, I should get rid of EM score from these things. Otherwise I'll have variables that I'm not using, and when I try to hunt down where I'm using them to get rid of them or use them later, I'm not going to know where that is. Better to get rid of them while I'm aware of them. Let's see, and I need to create another variable here that has the multiplier in it. And just make that 1 by default. And now ES multiplier. I think you can use pluses to concatenate strings in GameMaker, if I remember. Hopefully that works. So it should display 1 times whatever the score is. Let's find out what happens. I couldn't imagine it would work after this many changes, but it'd be nice if it did. Yeah, okay, white wasn't the best color to use, but it is actually working. Unfortunately, one other problem with changing the way the text is displaying is I need to change it back, because otherwise that change the text color isn't just affecting this set align, and the set color isn't just affecting the draw text that's in here, it's affecting the draw text that's outside of this draw event, and that includes the GUI stuff, which is no good because now I have centered white text instead of the black text that I had before. So let's see, old color. That's weird. I guess they allow for both the British version and the American version. The only thing is that the hint they give only shows the British version of the color spelling. Interesting. Well, I'm glad both work, so I can still be American at this. Hopefully there's a draw get color. Good. I'll go with the American version of the spelling. And I don't know if there's going to be a draw get H align. Hopefully there is. Nope. Ah, well, that's unfortunate. Let's just make sure there is no function to do that. As there's definitely a get, or a set. Well, guess I'll just have to assume that H align is FA left. At least I can keep the color. And off-white was a horrible choice, so maybe I just want to go with black anyway. May even want to create sprites for that, because well, no, I don't really want to create sprites for all those different point values, do I? Because I was just thinking, if I'm going to be displaying like multiple colors, you know, black is obviously easy to see, but like light blue and things like that probably not be as easy to see. And it doesn't stand out very much. You kind of want to border around it, but you can't do that with just the basic text functions. That's something I'm going to have to think about. Yeah, that's something I'm going to have to think about, but the function itself is working fine. Draw event for object game over EM score. That's where I had it. Thank you, Game Maker Debugging. Okay, that's where I was mistakenly adding this stuff. Okay. Whew. Well, mystery solved. Alright, so I can just get rid of that. Instead of putting things in enemy, I was putting them in game over. I guess because game over is above bad cowboy and the badder cowboy object, so I must have just seen it and thought, oh, that's the enemy object, and put all my scripting in there. So now, thankfully I don't have to go hunting for where I put that script anymore. Well, that takes care of enemies leaving behind a score and the multiplier text. Unfortunately, yeah, that would actually be quite big if I did it, so... All this is saying is I may want to change that, just drawing simple text to using sprites to draw the score that it leaves behind so that I can do something more fancy with it than just one color. And you'll see why soon enough. These are my colors. Let's drag them over so I remember them. The bullets. The first bullet speed is this cyan color. The second one is yellow. Third is orange. Last one's red. So I want that to affect the color I show the text at, which means not here, enemy score object. That's right, I changed things. Okay, so now I actually do have to pick the color based on the multiplier. If it's just simple 1, then draw that. I'm starting to forget it. Was there a switch statement for GameMaker? I think there was. Yeah, okay. Let's use that instead of a bunch of if-elses, just so it looks cleaner. Because it's going to be only one of these, hopefully. If it's 1, if it's 2, let's make sure I put these breaks in here. One of the things when you're doing like C and C++ programming is that you always forget to put these breaks in. And you start to wonder why your code is acting weird. This is usually why. Is there a is it called default or case else? Default. Okay, let's make sure we have a default in there just in case. Hopefully I don't need to use it. Let's line this stuff up here so it looks pretty. Okay, so if it's 1, I want to set the color to, well, I don't even need to worry about doing that. Let's just put draw set colors in there. So if it's just a multiplier of 1, use the default black. If it's 2, then use the cyan color. If it's that, then use the yellow color. Do I even have an orange? Let me see something here. Dark blue cyan, yellow, down, brown, pink, red, white. Let's just go with pink. Keep wanting to jump into enemy because that's where I was intending to put this thing the first time around. And red for the hottest bullet there. Okay. So now it should pick the color that's displayed based on the multiplier value. And before I forget, bullet 04 color, use pink. That'll take like half a second, but let's just put it at a quarter of an hour there. Taking Trello a little time to catch up to me. This won't take long either. But just so I have a good estimate of the amount of tasks I have left to do. Okay. Because I just realized that if my bullet's orange, I'm not using a Commodore 64 color, so I'm violating my own rules there. So good thing I noticed that. Actually, I might be using that brown color. Actually, I think I'm using that brown color. It's not orange, it's just that brown thing. Maybe, I don't know. I'll look into it later. Okay, so hopefully now the multiplier, if it's 1, it'll still be black text. Yeah, so it's fine for that. Let's see what happens when he gets up to multiplier 2. If these bullets get up to multiplier 2. Hopefully I can survive long enough for that to happen. I don't think I'm going to survive long enough to see the other multipliers. Nah, he got hit by a regular bullet. Well, I guess I should get some bullets going here. Hopefully some of them get up to speed. Just want an enemy to die to a high-powered bullet. There we go. Okay, so 5 times 200. Works fine. And I got my game over. Game over menu didn't show up properly, so that's something I have to look into. Not too critical, but I'm sure there's a reason for it. Oh, I know why. No, no, no. No, I thought it was because I deleted something that I shouldn't have, but that's not why. So that's a problem for another time. I am going to take a quick break now because I did get these two done. So I'm going to move those over to done. The enemies do leave behind a score, and it's pretty obvious what multiplier you got for hitting them. So if you hit one with like a red bullet, it leaves behind in red text 5 times, which is the multiplier. Actually 10 times, whatever. And if you hit them with an orange bullet, it's 5 times, etc. So that's working fine. The next thing is going to be setting barrels on nodes rather than manually placing them on the map. That way I can have more flexible like map creation and things like that. If I want to do it randomly, I can do it randomly. If I want to just have an array that says use these ones for level 1, use these ones for level 2, then I can do that. Just gives me a little more flexibility, but you'll see what I'm talking about when I get into it. So let's see, for now, jump off the desktop, and I'm going to take a quick break. I will be back in probably 2 minutes. For those of you on YouTube, I'll be back in about half a second. Thank you for waiting while I took that quick break. For those of you on YouTube, it was just a couple of seconds, but let me show you what I got to before the break. Before, the only way you would know how many points you got for killing an enemy would be to watch that score number in the upper right of the screen, but that wasn't very intuitive, so added this. Basically just shows how much the bullet was worth as a multiplier and how much the basic enemy was worth for shooting. Also have it color coded so that if you have a multiplier higher than 1, it kind of shows you that without even having to look at the multiplier number. So it'll be a little more intuitive about how many points you're getting for these things. And jumping over to Trello, my next task in my list is to create random object nodes. Now what this is right now in all of these rooms that I have, I'm putting down these barrel objects in very specific places. Doing it by hand, when what I could really do is, the same thing I'm doing with the enemy nodes, is just put down a bunch of possible places the barrel could go and let either a random generator pick which barrels go where, or I could just set it up in an array like I do with introducing enemies into the map. I want to make it more flexible because I don't want to just, create a new level by doing this by hand. Just gives me more flexibility. It'll help with gameplay later too. But before I make such a big change, I think I will back up my project here. If I can, there we go. And I'll say before barrel nodes, just so that I can go back if I screw things up. Okay, so as an experiment, I want to replace this. Where is it right now? Edit object. No, that part's fine. I just want to know what its coordinates are. Okay. So the first step is going to be to get exactly where I am right now. So there's a barrel at 147 by 232. There's a barrel at 167 by 356. There's a barrel here at 408 by 231. And 553 by 318. So at the very least I can get back to where I was before. Let me save this here. Okay. Should be enough. I don't know that I necessarily need to go in and see where these barrels are. Probably not that important. Let's just do it for town. So this is going to be a little bit scary, but it's going to be quite a big change. So let's see, barrel node, object node, obstacle node, obstacle node. Let's call it obstacle node because in future levels there'll be things like tombstones and stuff like that. So it's not always going to be a barrel. Does not have to be visible, or does it have to be visible? No, I guess it does have to be visible because if I use a debug thing to show where these nodes are, going to be kind of important to have it visible. Otherwise I'll be scratching my head wondering why things aren't showing up. So actually, that's kind of important. On the draw, I want to say if a certain debug switch is on, then show the nodes. What do I want to use? Let's just call it F4 for now and figure out how I'm doing this for the other places. Debug switch. What is 4? Resolution change. No, that's int level. This one is resolution change. This one is full screen change. So let's use debug switch 7 for barrel node display. And I think I do all my debug switching in here. So if I press, what is it, F7? Yep. If I press F7, then turn that on. Well, toggle it, I guess. I guess I need to just copy this over, don't I? Let's copy this over. No use reinventing the wheel here. So that'll toggle the nodes on and off, or at least the display of them, if I press F7. Since I did overwrite that, what I had in memory, let's copy and paste that again. And in obstacle node, if this is set to 1, then display. And it's going to be the exact same thing I'm doing with enemy nodes. Here, actually not enemy nodes, move nodes. I'm drawing an ellipse, so that's exactly what I want to do for obstacle nodes as well. Let's use outline for these ones just so I can tell the difference between them. Let's go ahead and place those in the town. So this is the scary part, deleting all the barrels and adding in obstacle nodes. And I do want to put that exactly where it was. Or do I? Maybe I don't. Maybe I want to have a whole bunch of these. Yeah, rather than going and fiddling with it later. Yeah, let's go ahead and pick some positions for it. So let's say that 140 by 150 is one possible location. Let's go with 160. And we'll see how that looks once I put a barrel on it. Yeah, I'm just wondering if I want to go through all that work at this point. Or should I just get it working first? You know, let's just get it working first. So 147 by 232. Because these will be easy enough to change later. $167 by $356. $408 by $231. And $553 by $318. And you can see how bad my memory is. 318. Alright. Unfortunately, all these question marks look the same. Yeah, I wish there was a way to change the color so I could tell the difference between like barrel nodes and enemy nodes and things, move nodes and things like that, but I guess I can't. So, that's setting that up in the town. Now, it shouldn't break anything. It should just mean there's no barrels anywhere. But if I use F7, it should show me where those barrels are supposed to go. Interesting. It doesn't turn those off. Did I forget to do something up here? Oh, I forgot to change this to 7. Okay. I was like, why can't I turn those things off? Let me just make sure that works here before I go any further. Okay. Yeah, now it's toggling them on and off. So the next step is going to be to put the barrels back in those places and make sure that part of the system works. It'll be kind of like working with move nodes. And I think I'm doing all that in my room manager. Create a player. Set the spawn index. Room start. Initialize the spawn array. Room start. Okay. Yeah, I guess I kind of want to do this in Room Manager anyway, so let's just copy this here. Initialize the obstacle array. One other thing this is going to give me flexibility with is switching out barrels with other objects and things like that too. And actually, I don't need a two-dimensional array for this. I only need a one-dimensional array. At least as far as I know, because I don't think I'm going to be using anything particular in terms of how these show up, or like timing or anything. There's no timing. That's what these things are here. This says like the first bad cowboy comes out in 2 seconds, the badder cowboy comes out 5 seconds later. That's what these are. With the barrels, they're all just going to be there from the start. And I probably would need an obstacle count. And with a one-dimensional array, it's length. And let's see, it's gonna give me back 4. So let's go ahead and subtract 1 here. That way I can loop from 0 to this. Whoop, I don't really need to group things. And I'm just going to do the same thing for all of the rooms, just for now. What else do I need to do? I think that's it for that. In terms of initializing the obstacle array, I think that's enough. Now I need to put these objects down at these nodes. So now I need instance count or something like that. 1 is less than or equal to, let's see what they have. Instance number, instance count. We'll find out if this works or not. So theoretically, if I have 4 obstacle nodes, this should go from 1 to 4. We'll find out. The next step is instance find. Let me make sure instance find does what I think it does. The number of the instance to find based on the order. Okay, that's fine. Yeah, this is basically exactly what I want to be doing. Yeah, instance number. Yeah, all right. Actually, I should use that. Instance number. So instance number, the number of obstacle nodes. Find the I obstacle node, X, probably not the most efficient way to do this, but it should work. And then I want to create a barrel at that instance, but more specifically, not just a barrel, but obstacle array. But I don't necessarily in the future want to create an obstacle at every obstacle node. So actually, the for loop should probably go through all of the obstacles that I want to set up. And I am going to have to keep track of which places I've set these up before. So I'm going to need a list of obstacle nodes. Yeah, this would be so easy to do if I don't have to worry about like a different number of obstacle nodes and obstacles. But how should I go about this, actually? So I do need to do something like this, but it's not for creating the instances. It's for initializing something. This is probably the same. I need to create a list. This one may need to be a two-dimensional array. I'm probably making this much more complicated than it needs to be, but it's probably because it's the first time I'm thinking about this problem. May come up with a better solution later. Obstacle node I equals because I want randomness. How would I guess I could do random. Range. Actually, isn't it irandom? Irandom range 0 to 1. Zero to 100. Yeah, okay, let's do it that way. And I better leave comments because this is kind of tricky, so I'm gonna need to remember what I'm doing here. Actually, I'm doing two things at once, aren't I? I don't need to do like a random thing if I'm doing this. So if I have 8 nodes and this many obstacles, yeah, okay, I think I'm going a little too far ahead of myself. Let's keep this as a note for now, but I don't think I need it. Instead, just loop through all of the obstacles. So if I have 4 barrels, loop through all of the barrels. And I need that to be less than. Spread that out a little bit, just so it's more readable. Okay, so go through all of the obstacles, so 0, 1, 2, 3, and create all of them right where they need to go. Let's just make sure this works first. I'll probably get an error because I did too many things there. No? Okay. Do need to fix one thing here. 0, 1, 2, 3, and obstacle count. I is 0. So it starts at 0, goes 0, instance find obstacle node. Maybe these are starting at 1 as well. If it doesn't give me an error and it gives me 4 barrels, that's the way it was supposed to be in the first place. No, 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 that's not the way it works. Close. I'm close. So I've got 0, 1, 2, 3. And this is giving... Let's not subtract 1. I think that was useful in the enemy thing, but it won't be useful here. Because I'm already using less than. So it goes 0, 1, 2, 3. And I do need to figure out whether this instance find starts from 0 or 1. Looks like it starts from 0, so this should give me 4 barrels. Let's find out. Okay, good. And they're still physical barrels, so at least I'm back to where I started, which is good. Very good. So now I can do the same thing for these other rooms. So that I'm no longer, setting up all this stuff inside of the room itself. So that was for the first room. The second room has one at 282, 290. .281 by 373. .415 by 288. Had some strange spider leaping at me. That was awesome. Bit of a distraction when a giant spider leaps at your hand. I don't know quite what it was doing. If I don't show up next week, I'm probably dead from a spider bite. That was interesting. I must have pissed it off with my typing. I'm sure it pisses you guys off too when you hear that clackety clack on YouTube and everything. So the spider was just getting its revenge on me. I don't think it actually bit into me though. We'll find out soon enough. I like spiders. Very, very cool. I don't like poisonous spiders, but I don't think this little guy was gonna hurt me. .374, and the last one. .563 by 306. Okay. Now I just have to put nodes down in those locations. So let's get rid of these. And once again, add obstacle nodes. At least get the game back to where it was. So 282 by 290 for the first one. There was a barrel there. There's also one at 281 by 373. .415 by 288. And the last one, if it lets me change my position, 418 by 375. These ones were in a square pattern. Now for the desert, let's get rid of these barrels. Yeah, my future plans involve not just having the same town thing show up every level. It's going to be, right now at least what I have planned is the town level, a desert level where you're fighting animals as well, a night level where you're fighting aliens because cowboys fight aliens, of course, and then a graveyard level where you're fighting ghosts. So that's the overall plan. 347 by 207. But for now, I'm just focusing on the core gameplay, so that'll come later. 349 by 257. 350 by 374. And last up, 563 by 306. And all that information is here in Room Manager when the room starts. And since it's always the same number of barrels, etc., probably not anything tricky going on. Use F4 to skip to the next level. Yep, everything's exactly as it was. Stage 2 is like that. Stage 3 is like that. Okay. So at the very least, I haven't broken the game by doing that. Haven't changed anything either, but I haven't broken it. The next thing would be to lay down a whole bunch of nodes and randomly pick some of them to have barrels. And let's see, if I use one node array, that's the same for every level, then I could put information in that node array when I initialize the room down here, like this obstacle array right now. It is a one-dimensional array, but what I could do is have an array that covers every node in the room and then decide whether or not to assign it an obstacle. So for example, I could have, nothing here. I could just say null or nil or empty. Nothing. No. Whatever they use for an empty variable, I could do that. So that if I had like 16 obstacle nodes in the room and I only used 4 of them, it would just skip over the ones I'm not using, not put anything down there. I think in the end that's what I want to do, because right now it's just putting a barrel down at all of them. So I guess the next step would be to figure out good places to put barrels. And since this is also going to potentially screw things up royally, I'm going to back it up again. Just in case. So right now I have these obstacle nodes just where I had the barrels placed before. That's probably not where I do want them. It seems like in a room of this size, I can get away with about, how many barrels? Let's take a look. Looks like about 8 barrels up and down, but let's put a little more work into it. And it's easy enough to figure out based on the resolution, but this is more fun to do it manually. Looks like I wasn't too far off in my estimation there. See how about 8 barrels can be stacked up here. Probably. It seems like it'd be kind of unfair to the player to have a barrel right on the edge of the screen. So it seems like 6 is a more logical number. And they'd probably be stacked something like that. So they'd be off the side of the screen a little bit so that the player always has a way to get around. Let me just try that level out, make sure that I can get around those. Yep, enough room up there, enough room over here, enough room down there. So even if all those barrels got put down, there'd be nothing getting trapped. So let's see, change position. Just to keep the numbers round, let's try 100 by 200. And make sure I can still get around that. It's a little awkward. That's probably not a good idea. Let's try a different round number. Let's try 110. Actually 100 is fine, but let's change this to 210. Yeah, that's obviously fine, but let me make sure I can squeeze around to the left as well. Yeah, that won't be too awkward. Yeah, I guess I should see how the enemy handles this as well. Let's see, what is it? F2. Let me turn off their bullets. The only thing I'm a little worried about is if I put a barrel on top of an enemy node, they're going to try and go right into it. Yeah, see, like right there, there was an arrow flashing on the left side of the screen, but because the node the enemy's trying to get to is covered by a barrel, which means it can't move there, there's just an enemy stuck off the screen. So I probably want to make sure to avoid where those are. So just 2, 2, and then the next row can have 6. The next row 2, 2, 6, 2, 2, 6, because the player needs to start in the middle as well. So just kind of keep the middle clear, and should be okay. So just to see, 100, 250, and then I don't want one there. And I want to move this one down a little further, so 100 by 330. Now I need to move it down further. Change position, 340. Let's just make sure that's enough for the enemies to get around. No, not quite. Not quite. That node's still kind of blocked out there. The bottom one's fine, it's just this one. This barrel right here is just kind of in a bad place. I guess if I moved this enemy node down further, moved this one down to here in the middle, then I could get 2 barrels in each place. That might be the way to go. So for example, right now it's at 94, kind of an odd number. 100 by 440. And I guess that's fine, 100 by that. Let's just see what this looks like on the grid. There we go. It looks alright. Let's just make sure an enemy comes up to here, if possible. Because as it is now, at least, it doesn't look like enemies can get stuck. Nice shot. Well-placed bullet there. Shot me in the face. Another good shot. Wow. Okay, that guy was hammering me. Let's turn off their bullets here. So it looks like right now, as it's set up, oh, there's a barrel missing up there, though. That's a problem. Oops. That's why. Thought that was going too smoothly. This will probably screw things up. Yeah. So I do need to move that enemy node down a little further so that it gets into this safe spot here. Because otherwise enemies aren't going to be able to use this node. So move that node down a little further. .300 is a nice round number. Let's see what it looks like here. Yep. So, at least in terms of like the y coordinate. Yep, and an enemy made it out there. Okay, alright, so that's fine. In terms of a y coordinate, it looks like, you know, these sets of barrels where the move nodes are, these coordinates are going to work just fine. For the next row over, where this barrel is actually pretty good. It's probably 150. So 50 per barrel. Yeah, that should work out just fine. So 100 by 210. The next one down is 100 by 250. So yeah, the barrels are spaced out about 40 apiece, which makes sense because I think that's how big their sprite is. This should be 360 actually. And that should be 400. So for my first row, those should be the 4 spots I have my obstacle node. Let me just make sure. I made a few minor adjustments. I want to make sure I don't screw things up. No, it's still fine. Okay. For the second row from the left, I'm going to want 100 by, well, 150 by 210. 150 by 250. 150 by 290. 150 by 340. 150 by 380. Something like that. There's a problem with that though. It's going to be kind of weird that they're not lined up. 360 by 400 is about right. Guess I could try to space them out a little bit. Yeah, they'll probably be fine spaced out. That might screw things up. No, that's still fine. Yeah, that's probably the way I want to do it. Because I don't want to have like the barrels all kind of like zigzaggy all over the place. If I can get away with 350. If I can get away with these numbers, then I should be fine. Almost. Almost. Well, I think that's just going to be a task for another time. It's probably not going to be very interesting to watch me just, calculating this over and over and over again to find the perfect value. So I think I will stop there. Basically what I'm going to be doing, you know, for however long it takes, I guess, is to find out the right balance of this so that, at the end of the day, what I want to have happen is this. Something like this, basically, where it's only going to make sense when I show the next row. But basically a pattern like this where wherever there's an enemy move node, I don't put a barrel and I make sure that the barrel's not obstructing the path. But wherever there isn't a move node, there can be a barrel. Obviously, I don't want a level where there's just barrels everywhere, because then the player is going to start in the middle and have no way out. So I probably also need to keep this middle path clear, just completely clear. So that worst case scenario, it looks something like this. Right. So the player always has a way to go. Maybe I should get rid of these ones as well, actually. That's probably fair. Yeah, so maybe I don't have to worry about the up-down zigzaggy stuff as much, because I'll always keep these paths clear. So the player can always start and go directly to the left, directly to the right, directly up, directly down. And the enemies can always get to the player, bullets always bounce around. Obviously, this would be a pretty hellish level if this many barrels came out, because one bullet bouncing down that corridor is going to pick up speed pretty quick and the player is going to have nowhere to go. So, maybe that's going to be one of the difficulty things. Like a harder level would have something crazy like this, like the old Mr. Do game where it's like you've just got these narrow tunnels and the ball is bouncing through them or whatever. We'll find out. But this looks like a pretty good setup in terms of the potential places a barrel can go. So I am going to keep that as it is, save that, jump out, and go over to my Trello thing. And I do have random object nodes. I should change that task, actually, because I didn't mean random. I just meant obstacle nodes. When I made that task, that's not what I meant. So I did do that. So now instead of having to manually place barrels, I can put things down. I can just put obstacle nodes down and have the game decide on the fly what should go there, whether or not something should go there. So that's done. So recapping for episode 13, what I did was I made it more obvious to the player how many points they're getting for the things that are happening in the game by having the enemy leave behind a score when they die. That score also includes the multiplier from the bullet so that the player can tell. It also has the color for the multiplier too, so that the player can easily tell, okay, I shot that enemy with, a really fast bullet or something like that. And they can intuitively tell, gameplay-wise, that it's more advantageous to, if they're looking for score, to have bullets bouncing around the screen before they hit the enemy. I may need to adjust how fast the bullets get after bouncing around, because right now it's actually really hard to get a bullet bouncing around fast enough to kill an enemy, at least intentionally. So maybe I'll just make it every bounce the bullet changes color. That's probably worth doing. But that's episode 13. For episode 14, if it comes over at some point, there we go. Come on, there you go. See, I learned from my past mistakes. Instead of having to, during the live show, go all the way to the right here, add something, and then try to drag it over, I just made it in advance, brought it over. So episode 14, I think at this point it's probably about time to get into sound effects. So I'm going to get into sound effects, and I'm also going to get into particles. So there's a, venturing into new territory here, but I don't think it'll be too difficult, because just to give you a heads up, for sound effects, one of the things I'm using is something called BFXR. Because I have an 8-bit game, this works just fine. And just to give you a sneak preview here, all this is a program that a very generous soul created. There's also a web version if you look up BFXR. It gives you exactly what you need. Like, for example, if I want an explosion, I can click that, get an explosion. If it's not quite what I want, then I can adjust these things. If it's too far from what I want, then I can just click it again, get another random explosion, until I get something that's close to what I want, and then I can fiddle with these things. And you can save the wave files, you can save these settings so that you can fiddle with it later. Amazing. The person that did this is a godsend. For particles, I'm going to be using something called Particle Designer. And just to show you what this is, if it loads up, I guess it's not going to load up. Interesting. Well, I guess I better figure out what's going on with that before next week. Good thing I started it up. But what Particle Designer does is it was working before. What it does is it allows you to put down, you've got your central node, which is emitting particles, and it allows you to kind of randomly select particles until you get something it's a similar thing. Select particles until you get something that's pretty close to what you want, and then you can make minor adjustments. Same principle as this, so making particles and making sound effects is simple in my case because I'm going for a retro style anyway. Sound effects for a more modern game usually require, an expert, or at least you have to find sound libraries online, or whether they're free or whether you pay for them. Usually you have to find that to get what you want, because sound effects are really, really hard to get right. Thankfully, in my case, because of the retro styling, pretty close is very good. If I was making a Call of Duty game, then I'd probably have to get a Foley artist, go to a studio, have, different guns, different things that they're doing, just like a movie, to get that sound just right, because sound effects are very important in a game. If a gun doesn't sound meaty enough, if it sounds too echoey, all those things can really kind of throw you out of the experience, because humans are very sensitive to sound in weird ways, as opposed to visuals where you can do some trickery. So sound is actually a very complicated subject. Thankfully, in my case, I don't have to worry about it too much. Particles as well usually require like an expert in particles and effects to do, but in my case, again, because it's retro, I can probably get away with using that program that's not working at the moment. So that'll be my start. Gunfire, dodging. I don't think any of these will actually take that much time. I've got an hour for each of them, but I don't think it'll take that long, especially once I get to knowing. Actually, bumper hit. That is what this is. Let me get rid of this one, so I have the same task in twice. Yeah, let's delete that. Yep. And if I can get it working, if I can get particles for the barrels working, then I can probably get to this as well. So even though it says, 4.5 hours for episode 14, probably won't take that long because sound effects are just going to be going through until I find something that I kind of like, saving it, and then just playing it from the game, which shouldn't be too difficult because GameMaker, I think, does a pretty good job of making that stuff simple. Same with particles. If for some reason sound effects do take a really long time, then I guess I'll just have to save particles for episode 15 or whatever. But let's keep it ambitious. And I think that's going to wrap it up for this week. Thank you for watching. If you're watching this later on YouTube, come by anytime and check us out on Twitch. As you can see, my green screen freaked out on me because I was leaning into the camera too much. Hopefully I didn't screw things up too much while I was recording the show. I do this on Twitch every Saturday morning my time, which is Japan, 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. If you're in the States and it's still daylight savings time, that's 4 to 6 p.m. on Friday night. If it's Mountain Time, it's 5 to 7, Central 6 to 8, Eastern 7 to 9. If you're in the UK, it should be midnight to 2 a.m., crossing into Saturday. If you're with me in Japan, obviously it's just Saturday morning 8 to 10. If you're in Australia, depending on where you live, it's usually it starts around 9 to 11 a.m. And if you're in New Zealand, it starts around noon. Unfortunately, things are going to get crazy because everyone has daylight savings time implemented in different ways, so probably come October, all of these times are going to be kind of screwy, but just as an estimate, should be enough to tell you when I'm coming on. If the best way to know is to just follow on Twitter, which is Tengu, because I always make an announcement 30 minutes before I start the show, so you can just look there and know when I'm doing it. If you're watching the videos on YouTube, it should automatically say that I'm on Twitch. And don't worry if you don't catch the episodes live, because I always put them up later on YouTube. YouTube.com, Blue Tengu Studio. The Twitch feed is Twitch TV, Blue Tengu. The website, where I post the episodes and information, is www.bluetengu.com, so please stop by and leave some comments. Leave some comments in the video, and also I talked with a few people about the show. The episodes are long, obviously, because making a game does take a long time, and I do want to show everything, so I'm not going to change the format per se in terms of, showing big 2-hour chunk episodes on YouTube. But I do need to come up with some digest format or something in the future to try and keep this form compact so you can keep up with the show without having to watch 2-hour episodes every week. I'll probably have to think about that in the future, but at least for now I'm sticking with this format because I do want to show you everything that goes into making a game from concept to completion, hence our opening every time. Anyway, thank you for watching, and I hope to see you next time.